Now, a big-time series just took place between the San Antonio Spurs and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Two young franchises that's been rebuilding in recent history that have had exponential growth into being the two best franchises in the NBA. Two 60-win teams going at it for the first time since like the 98 finals between the Bulls and Jazz. So that goes to show on paper how historic this matchup was. I think in real time, everybody kind of felt the magnitude of this series game after game. Game one definitely set the tone in terms of what kind of series it's going to be. And if you're OKC, you kind of look back at that game one and you see how pivotal of a game that truly was. Because if they win that game, they could be looking at a series that they could have handled in 6 games. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting to look at it from that perspective. Nonetheless, that's not what happened. You know what I mean? Jalen Williams, in the time he was healthy, he missed that big-time potential go-ahead 3 at that end of that first OT. If he makes that, as little as he contributed, I'm sure he wanted to contribute more, but if he makes that probably would have been more than enough for them to punch their ticket. Nonetheless, here we are with a San Antonio New York Knicks finals, and I have to admit, as tough as it is to admit, Wemby was the best player in the Western Conference Finals, as he obviously got the Magic Johnson Award. You know what I mean? Signifying that you were the best player in the Western Conference Finals that series. It does definitely suck to see that Shea had his by far best game of the whole series with 35 and 9, only 3 turnovers, 3 steals. He had his best game of the whole series at the end, and unfortunately, it still wasn't enough to get OKC the win and punch them a ticket to their finals. I know Shea's definitely kicking himself over his shooting percentages, definitely very uncharacteristic. I think that was the biggest thing when, not just looking at his counting numbers, but you look at that field goal percentage, 55% in the regular season, and, you barely get it above 40%, for the whole 7-game series. So I know he was talking about how he feels like he didn't put his best foot forward this series shooting-wise. Shots just weren't falling. He was taking all the same shots, taking all the same looks. They just weren't falling, but that's the nature of the game. But with that being said, Wemby was definitely the best player this whole series. You could obviously see it from game one with that monster stat line he put up of like 41 and 25. You can kind of know, all right, when the Spurs are playing at their best, they could easily be the best. So credit to Wemby. But beyond Wemby, I mean, he only had 22 and 7 to clinch the game. You know what I mean? That kind of goes and shows that, Wemby don't need these big-time monster stat lines for the Spurs to win. Champagnie 6 of 10 from 3. Castle doing what he does on both ends of the ball. Dylan Harper stepping up with some incredible shot making in that second half. I mean, that 3-pointer that he hit over Shea, I think it was, to put them up like 12 in that fourth quarter, that was almost like the gut punch, that really indicated the Spurs weren't planning on losing this game. You know what I mean? Vassell didn't shoot it too well, but just the two-way play he delivered with, guarding Shea. Guarding the Chet, guarding the Shea when necessary, coming off the ball screens and all that stuff. But, you look at the Spurs and they were just absolutely relentless. You could tell that, they didn't know better. They weren't prisoners of the moment. They weren't deer in the headlights in terms of, putting too much on themselves or playing it too chill. They had an urgency about them. Being on the road, they clearly knew what they had to do going into the series. And they figured it out each game. They got more and more comfortable being in front of a guy like Shea, facing a defense like Oklahoma City. Even Castle, him talking about how he feels like the refs weren't giving them the same kind of calls that OKC was getting, and to, talk about stuff like that after the game and bounce back the next game with no excuse and not looking for those calls and just playing through it. I feel like that those were the things that ultimately got San Antonio the win. And like I said, well deserved. They got a great coaching staff, great organization, great amount of depth. Carter Bryant, Dylan Harper, these guys are rookies, legitimate rookies, playing this deep in the Western Conference Finals, making a real impact on the best player, on the best team in the league, against the best team in the league. You guys got to give them credit. So credit to San Antonio. I thought Shea was going to be the best player in the series. I thought that, OKC was going to pull this out in 6. Worst case scenario, 7, obviously. But San Antonio, they put no doubt in anybody's mind that, they deserve to be there. You know what I mean? As far as the injuries and stuff like that for OKC, definitely not going to use that as an excuse. You know what I mean? They got this far without them. They were more than capable of winning this Game 7 without J-Dub and A.J. Mitchell. Of course, if they have them, that could be a whole different story. But, the what-ifs can go on for forever. So, definitely looking forward to a healthy J-Dub, and A.J. Mitchell, of course, next season. But as far as this season, it's tough to repeat in general. So for OKC and their fans, you know what I mean, understand that your window's not closed. You know what I mean? You're still right there in the mix. Exciting to think about the moves you could potentially make. You know what I mean? If you want to make a big trade or re-signing guys like Lou Dort and Hartenstein, those are 2 guys that they got to make decisions on with team options. So a lot to look forward to for the offseason for the OKC. But they shouldn't be making any kind of rash decisions in order to feel like they could compete with the Spurs next year. I feel like they did enough to show that they could compete, and with a little game plan tweaks and all that good stuff, I feel like we could see a rematch of this next year, you know what I mean, in the Western Conference Finals, with them being the 1 and 2 seed either way. So very interesting stuff. But with that being said, let's get straight into the Spurs Knicks breakdown. All right. New York has been just waiting. You know what I mean? They've been waiting. I seen a funny Josh Hart tweet about how he's about to hate watch like crazy that Game 7. So hopefully it went well for him. If I was the Knicks, if I had to guess who they were rooting for, I would guess that they were rooting for the Spurs. I know obviously they got the alien and Wemby down there, and he causes his whole batch of problems for NBA offenses and defenses, of course. But I think when you really look at the regular season success and the recent success that New York has had over the Spurs, I think that it's very fair for New York to be more comfortable with a guy like Wemby. I think that, straight into the breakdown in terms of the keys to victory for New York, a couple that I wrote down. One, you gotta win the physicality battle. You know what I mean? And with that being said, that means, the rebounding battle got to be yours. You have to be ready to push Wemby off his spot. You got to be ready to make these shooters uncomfortable. You got to make sure that Castle and Harper and Fox, that they're seeing bodies coming down the lane. You know what I mean? It's definitely easier said than done. But when you look at the way the Knicks team is constructed, especially defensively, they're built to have wing players shut down other wings and guards. You know what I mean? I think that an OG, a McHale, a Josh Hart, those are the guys that need to be running around like they have been all postseason. They need to be making it tough with their length on guys like Castle, guys like Fox. They need to be able to bump with them to turn them into jump shooters and live with those results. Castle, Fox, Harper, they all love getting to the basket, as we know. The Knicks, I feel like they have enough size and length as individual defenders to be able to affect that without overcompensating on the help. So with that being said, a guy like McHale, who probably will start on Castle maybe, he's got to be able to bump with him and use that length to turn him into a jump shooter. Get under those screens, put a hand up, live with those results. You know what I mean? Because obviously Wemby's going to be rolling around, trying to get looks anywhere on the floor. And he requires a lot of attention no matter what. There's not just one person that can guard him. So it's very important that as individual defenders on the Knicks, you got to be ready to stay in front of your man and turn them into jump shooters. You know what I mean? No easy straight line drives. We can't afford that kind of stuff. So being physical and winning that rebound battle is very tough. You got to hold the Spurs to one shot. With a guy like Wemby, when he starts getting offensive rebounds, that's when his stat line starts looking godly and all kinds of stuff that looks like straight out of a video game. Hold the Spurs to one shot. You get your rebound. You go about your way. That gives you guys the best chance to win every possession. You know what I mean? Cat is a great rebounder. His motor needs to be on. You know what I mean? Speaking of Cat, obviously, like I just said, defensively, it's a team effort. There's no doubt that it's a team effort defensively. So I'm not saying, Cat, you were responsible for shutting down Wemby or you're responsible for doing this or that against Wemby. It's a team effort. You know what I mean? If anything, I'm depending on Mitchell Robinson to be more of a one-on-one stopper than Cat by far. But what I am relying on you and what I'm holding you accountable to the series, Cat, is that low post work. I need you to be able to go into that low post like you used to a couple years ago in Minnesota. Whether it's Wemby, definitely if it's anybody else in that starting lineup, whenever you can get that matchup against Wemby on the low post, I need to see you throw a shoulder in his chest. I need you to listen. I won't even mind one of those hook fouls, one of those I'm turning my elbow into his side as I'm going to turn the corner. I need to see one of those. I need Cat to set the tone. Physicality-wise, offensively-wise, make it easy for this Knicks offense. We all know Jalen Brunson's going to get that house thrown at him. I bet you the same coverage Shea was getting, Brunson is going to get damn near that coverage. The only reason why not as tight is just because New York probably has better shooting surrounding them. But other than that, wherever Josh Hart's at, hey, we're doubling off of Josh Hart. We're sending two to Jalen Brunson. So what do we have to do? We have to find other ways to score. That's why I'm looking at you, Cat, to make sure that in that low post, when you got a guy like Wemby on you at the top of the key, I need you to use your momentum to stay balanced, get into his shoulder a little bit, extend a little bit once or twice. Make him feel that you're there. Make him understand that he has to guard you. You know what I mean? The more Wemby has to worry about a guy like Cat, the more that it spreads out the offense. It gives Wemby less of a chance to help on everybody else. Maybe Josh Hart could get left wide open, get a nice wide open drive. You know, the Spurs like to have Wemby on the low corner shooter, right? On the weak side corner shooter. Why? So he can roam from the help. They like Wemby staying low. Well, hey, Cat, if you're going to be roaming up top, playmaking with the ball, waiting for these down screens and these cuts, every once in a while you're going to have to go downhill and either track that help, or if Wemby don't help as much as he should, get to that layup. You know what I mean? Make the Spurs change their defensive game plan from, hey, we're just going to keep Wemby low, to, hey, let's put Wemby on Cat. That's going to open things up. You know what I mean? And I think it's very possible when you look at Cat's touch, inside and outside the paint, if a Vassell or Champagne's going to start the game out on him because Wemby's guarding that low man, that corner three, Cat's more than talented enough to dominate that matchup to make the Spurs say, hey, we can't hold Cat with a Vassell. We got to put Wemby on him because Cat's spacing the floor from 30 at the top of the key, and Wemby's not effective right now, not effective as he could be. So Cat, you have to make sure that they find a way to alter their game plan. It has to be because of you. All right. The next thing is the Knicks, your bench, man. Your bench has been great. Your bench has been the reason why this point differential has looked as pretty as it has been. You guys have immaculate shooting coming off the bench, and guys like Landry Shamet, guys like Miles McBride, even a Jordan Clarkson every once in a while when he gets in the game. You guys got players that can really space the floor. When the first quarter is winding down and they're making their subs, they got guys coming in that makes it easy for Brunson to either spray out to shooters or keep them spread out so, Brunson can attack one-on-one. You guys are going to need that bench production more than ever. You know what I mean? Not only in terms of spacing the floor and knocking down these shots, but more importantly, a guy like Mitchell Robinson. It would have been a whole different segment, this pod, if I heard Mitchell Robinson was ruled out because they said there was no timetable for him originally. But with the broken pinky he got, he's going to be able to play through it. So, obviously, he already can't shoot free throws. How much worse can it get from that perspective? But defensively, his impact is huge. I think that this is probably the toughest defender Wemby's going to see all playoffs. Now, I don't know how much that's saying given the fact that how good Wemby is. He's obviously an elite scorer. You can't really do much with him in general, especially when he's hitting from the outside as we've seen. But Mitchell Robinson, you could look up the film. You could look up the NBA Cup, what they went through. Mitchell Robinson, made Wemby a little uncomfortable, even on some of those jump shots he was taking. So I expect Mitchell Robinson to get some big-time minutes. I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Brown runs more of a double big lineup with Mitchell Robinson and Cat out there just to create more matchup problems, just to create more physicality and chaos, especially on that offensive rebounding side. I could definitely see the Knicks having a huge margin if they play that double big lineup. I know on the other side there's questions defensively if the Spurs are running Wemby and the rest of those guys out there. Cat will have to chase a Vassell or Champagny at some point, and that could get dicey. But I think if you're looking at it from the Knicks' perspective, they could benefit greatly. Like I said, from the physicality and the defense of keeping Wemby out the paint, one, and forcing them to take tough shots with tough contests in a Mitchell Robinson if he's guarding him. So that's super important. The Knicks got to come out with their valuable bench like they have been all postseason. And I could see the Knicks really being able to be effective, with the Spurs bench versus the Knicks bench. I can see the Knicks having that advantage, as good as the Spurs got with a Dylan Harper or Carter Bryant coming off the bench. But the last key to victory for the New York Knicks, in my opinion, is clutch time execution. I know that this is their first finals trip for a majority of those guys, if not all of them, except for Anunoby. As it is for the Spurs as well, of course, their first trip. But the Knicks is definitely a team that's been playing a little longer than the Spurs. They've had a couple more playoff runs than the Spurs, and more than anything, you could tell that the Knicks are just ready. The Knicks are ready. They've been sitting at home. They've been pummeling this Eastern Conference, you know what I mean? They understand that what they contribute, what they control affects the game. They're no longer worried about who they're facing. They're no longer worried about, any kind of momentum that anybody else got. You could tell that they're really focused on themselves. And I think that the biggest key, one of the most important keys of this series, is going to be their clutch time execution. One, it's about keeping it close, withstanding their runs, withstanding those plays that are going to be loud for the San Antonio Spurs. They got Wemby, they got Castle, they got freak athletes. They're facing a team that thrives off of energy, running the floor, playing with pace, forcing turnovers. There's going to be a lot of times where you're going to get punched in your mouth this series. But the most important thing for the Knicks is withstanding all of that by keeping the game close. And when the game is close as the clock's winding down, they have to be the more comfortable team executing their sets. They have to be the more comfortable team getting stops and knowing what they're willing to give up and what they're not willing to give up. They have to be the more comfortable team being aggressive, being physical, and rebounding. All these keys that I was just naming about the Knicks culminate into their clutch time execution. They're going to have to figure out their right lineup sooner or later. Depth is cool and all that, but if you don't know how to use it, it's going to be a whole different situation. So it's very important that the Knicks execute down the stretch. In my opinion, they don't have the best player in this series. I'm not going to say that as bad as I do want to say it, but Brunson's the second best player in the series. But what he is at the top of the list, out of players in the series, he's the most clutch player of the series. So Brunson might be the second most talented player, but Brunson is the most clutch player. So I'm expecting him and his playmaking to rise above everybody else as the game is coming down the stretch. And as a result of that, the New York Knicks should be able to put up points. They should be able to get stops late in the game. You know what I mean? All this rest they've had to heal their body, to stay fresh. They need to use it all to their advantage. I know that when the ball gets tipped up and the clock starts running, it's a whole different game. But it's very important that the Knicks use this time off, use this game planning to understand that, hey, this team, the Spurs team, can be beat. You know, just because Wemby's on the floor, it's not going to be a domination thing every single trip down the floor. It's not going to be Cat's too soft. It's not going to be the Knicks aren't good enough. They have all the tools they need. They just need to execute. They need to stay calm like they have been all postseason. All right, so that's my breakdown on the Knicks, okay? Now, here are my keys to victory for the Spurs if they want to win the 26 NBA Finals, all right? The first and foremost key, they need to establish their team defense. They need to make sure they know how to make Brunson uncomfortable. It's even more important that they make Cat uncomfortable as well. This is a whole unit that's full of pit bulls. Obviously, one of the best offensive teams in OKC, the best offensive player in the league. They just found a way to make him shoot well below his averages, like 10, 15% lower than his averages. You know what I mean? For a whole 7 games. If you're the Spurs, at this point, you have to understand that as great as you have players that can score the ball, finish, dime, shoot threes, all this good stuff, your identity as a team is your defense, your elite defense. When you're the best team in the world, you're the best defensive team in the world. So the Spurs need to really understand that. They need to not be complacent at all on that end. Even if they see some threes go in from guys that don't really make threes, right? Like a Castle or a Fox or a Harper. Just because you have it going on that end, don't rest on that defensive end just because you're making shots. I think that when we've seen when we've seen the San Antonio Spurs lose games, a lot of the times, in my opinion, I feel like it's because they got too comfortable on defense because of offense was working, you know, and they didn't put in that same effort on defense when that's what they should be hanging their hat on. You know what I mean? I think they get lazy sometimes. They rely on reaching too much. Sometimes they're too aggressive. And with a guy like Brunson, he's ready to expose all of that. If you're not ready, you know what I mean? And at this point, Brunson's a savvy veteran that knows how to draw those calls. It'll be interesting. Obviously, the finals, so more physicality will be allowed and all that stuff. So it'll be very interesting to see how Castle and Brunson go at it and see if Brunson can get Castle in foul trouble. But establishing your team defense is most important. Understanding that, hey, Wemby's going to be the low man. He's trying to deny everything in the paint. We want Brunson thinking that he has enough space to come in here, and then we're gonna collapse on Brunson in the middle of the paint and make him make tough passes. That's what they need to do. Use their length, use their size, use their speed, use their strength. If they do that, they turn the ball over. They get easy, fast break points. San Antonio can get real comfortable in this series. So first and foremost, understand that defensive identity, attach to that identity, and use that to your advantage. That's number one key. The number two key, offensively, they have to move the ball. You know what I mean? I think that as great as the Spurs defense is, the Knicks is not far behind at all. They're definitely constructed differently. I think that, you know, obviously the New York Knicks is more of a perimeter-centric defensive team that got just defensive stoppers that, you know, can prevent dribble penetration and can hold guys under their averages and make, you know, shots that players are comfortable with a little more uncomfortable. But if you're the Spurs, it's very important that You find a way to move that ball. You find a way to get those shooters open. You find a way to expose Brunson in a lot of the actions, even though the Knicks do a phenomenal job of covering for Brunson and recovering and making sure that he knows where he got to be and Brunson knows where the help is as well. But I think when the Spurs start moving that ball too, they could be just as dangerous on offense as defense, And what I mean by moving the ball is like not just pick and rolling for Wemby and just having him roll to the basket or just give Wemby the ball and let him work. A lot of the times their offense fails when they just resort to that. You know what I mean? I think that when you see, Wemby running those actions from the corner, curling all the way into the paint, stuff like that, you know what I mean? Or flare screens while Castle's running a ball screen with Wemby on the opposite side just to keep the defense moving. I think that when they keep them spread and keep their shooters active and in the play and they get them touches and they make it feel like anybody can get the ball instead of just hey, we're running a Castle Wemby pick and roll 5 times in a row, or hey, we're going to flash Wemby up at the high post and let him face up and work. Like, of course, those plays are going to work and you're going to need those plays for sure. But the Spurs need to be focused on moving the ball, pushing the pace, and staying active on that off-ball movement. You know what I mean? Because they're athletes. You know what I mean? So being stagnant and relying on the skill work isn't their strong suit at this point. So if the Spurs can keep that ball moving and give themselves some good looks from 3, as you can see in a game like Game 7 on the road against OKC, they're moving that ball and they're walking out the gym shooting 17 from 40 for 3. And this is coming from a team that's not filled with a bunch of sharpshooters like that. You know what I mean? Aside from a couple, but they got guys in their lineup where they're shooting sub 35%, sub 33%. So to walk out the gym 17 from 40 from the 3 means that you're moving the ball. So when the Spurs are moving that ball, you got to tip your hat to them, give them all the credit in the world because they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's another key for the Spurs. Wemby. That's the third key, Wemby. You have to Wemby has to have an inside-out approach. The games they lost against OKC were probably the games where he shot in the paint the fewest amount of times. You see a Game 1, you see a Game 6 where he's being aggressive from the start and he has a non-negotiable mentality of I'm getting to the basket and I'm taking the shots that I want to take. You know what I mean? And he's living with the results. Of course, he can get up a 3 whenever he wants. But it's very important that he establishes those looks in the paint because that's where the defense gets attracted the most. That's where it opens up for that ball movement like I just mentioned. You know what I mean? But when Wemby's playing up top, yes, he's capable of putting the ball on the floor, but it's a lot more awkward. It's a lot more resistance for Wemby to have to make a play from the top of the key rather than on that low block or that free throw line or that restricted dotted area. So Wemby, inside out approach, but not too much on Wemby because this dude is capable of doing anything. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a finals game where he makes 5+ threes. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a 40-point game at some point, just doing whatever he wants. But I think that for a general rule of thumb, if you're San Antonio, you want to just keep him in the paint as much as possible. Make him a threat in the paint as much as possible. Keep him as closest to the rim so when a shot goes up, he got a good chance of getting that offensive rebound. Then you're drawing fouls. You're running it up. You could get free throws, second chance points, of course. That's when the Spurs are dangerous. You know what I mean? When he's using that height to his ultimate advantage. You know what I mean? Not just to rise over defenders, but to, hey, let me get this board. Let me go back up with it. All right, so that's another huge key. Like I said, playing in transition too, just continuing to move the ball and all that stuff for the Spurs. And last but not least, they're going to have to find a way to consistently make shots from the outside. I think that, like I said, with a guy like Champagnie and Vassell out there, those are obviously 2 amazing shooters that cause problems, but sometimes it could kind of be an overload with the guy like Castle and Fox out there that you're not as worried about from the 3-point line. So I feel like the Knicks have an understanding that, okay, Castle, Fox, they want to get to the paint. We're going to do a good job putting the right bodies to prevent those drives, first of all. But then we're also going to know how to help and recover and all that stuff, where you're putting Champagne and Vassell in positions sometimes where they have to take tough threes. I think that a guy like Castle is going to need to be comfortable putting up 3 to 4 threes a game maybe. Fox needs to get comfortable taking 5 threes a game. And obviously not forcing the issue, Then I don't expect them to shoot it every game, but there's gonna be a couple of wins. I feel like the Spurs are gonna have to get a couple wins by, hey, nothing for Wemby, nothing for these shooters. Castle, they're going under the screen. One of these times you got to dribble, pull up, and knock down that 3. Hey, Fox, they keep coming under these screens. I need you to step back, sit behind the screen, and knock this down. And show them that they got to step up just so you can free up Wemby a little more, free up the other guys a little more because in the finals there's always risers, there's always drop-offs, but definitely whenever you have a player that could get to the basket, whenever you have them making threes, and whether it's 2 or 3, you know what I mean? Those are timely shots, and those are shots that affect the defense, you know what I mean? They don't necessarily have them changing the game plan and all that stuff, but if you can get comfortable sooner than later in this series from 3, a Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox, you just open up the offense that much more. You know what I mean? So it's definitely a balance of, hey, play your game, but also, hey, we're on the biggest stage. I need you to step up. You know what I mean? And not necessarily do things that we've never seen you do before, because I've seen Castle make multiple threes throughout this playoff run in every series. You know what I mean? He had a big three threes performance against Portland. He had another big one in Game 6 against Minnesota to close them out. So I've seen Stephon Castle's range. I know that he's capable of doing stuff like this. Obviously, Fox, he's been comfortable taking threes at this point for a couple years now. So I think that, on the biggest stage, you want to be able to feel comfortable letting it fly. You don't want to feel like you're just walking into the Knicks game plan of, oh, they know I'm going to the paint. I know this is going to be crowded. Let me just continue to do this. No, you're going to have to find ways to get creative and affect the scoring. You know what I mean? So with that being said, those are my keys to victory for San Antonio. Now predictions. Now, with everything I said about New York, everything I said about San Antonio, obviously San Antonio had the better record, so they'll be having home court advantage. If there was a Game 7, they would be playing in San Antonio. Final starts Wednesday in San Antonio. I'm looking forward to that. But with all that being said, all the keys that I broke down that I came up with and from what I thought and what I've seen, I truly think that the New York Knicks are going to win this series in 6 games. I know that majority of the basketball world, if you say, had OKC or San Antonio winning before we even knew who won the Western Conference Finals. And it's cool to just hear that, play along with that, because, one, you don't know who's in the finals yet, right? But, 2, you also understand that, hey, these are 2 60-win teams that have been going at it for 7 games, you know what I mean? It almost feels like the championship. Of course it's not. But I think that now that San Antonio has won that Game 7 and OKC's eliminated, in my head, just in my opinion, I feel like OKC would have been the tougher matchup for a team like New York, for its own different reasons. You know what I mean? I really won't get into that because that's not where we're at right now. But I did think OKC would be the tougher matchup for New York. That's why I said earlier I feel like New York preferred San Antonio. But now that we know that it's San Antonio, New York, I feel like New York has all the pieces, and they have the system, and they have the players to be able to beat San Antonio. I think the biggest key out of all these factors I named was the physicality. I think that's going to be the biggest difference. You know what I mean? Whether San Antonio sweeps or New York sweeps or this series goes to 7, the biggest factor you'll see in this series is the physicality, is the rebounding. It's going to be the points in the paint. It's going to be the second chance points. It's going to be the fouls. And I think that New York just has more than enough guys that can consistently win that physicality battle across the board of matchups. So for that reason, I feel like I got New York at 6. And I'm not worried at all in terms of, I think San Antonio. I just think that as good as San Antonio is, I think that they have too many lapses in terms of going from a great offensive team to okay offensive team to great defensive team to a team that can give up a lot of threes sometimes, that can overcompensate the Wemby help on the low man. I think that New York will be able to figure out how they're going to get their shots off, how are they going to get comfortable, how are they going to get stops, and I think they're going to consistently rebound a little more, and that's why I have New York as 6. So I'll be very interested to hear what everybody else thinks about the different keys, about all these breakdowns. But that's my prediction for the finals. I got New York winning at 6. I got the winning game 6 in the Garden, and it going crazy in New York. You know what I mean? But that's episode 5 for today. I appreciate you guys for watching, tuning in. We'll be back at it next week too, in the middle of the finals, give you an update on my predictions and what we've been seeing and all that stuff. So I hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe, comment, share with a friend. Let's talk about it. All right. And I hope you have a good day. All right. Peace.